everyone. Alex Haley was the author of the book Roots, and he had an interesting picture hanging on his office wall. It was a picture of a turtle on a fence post. And when asked why he had this on his wall, he would say, "Whenever I look at what I have written and I get feeling really proud, get thinking of how great I am, I look at that picture. It reminds me that turtle did not get up there by himself. Someone else put him there." We're picking up in chapter 3, verse 27, which begins with the words, "Where then?" Now the word "then" ties it back to what comes before. Remember that what Paul has been showing us is that a righteousness has been revealed that is apart from the law, but that comes through faith in Jesus. This section picks up the same idea, but introduces the next section as well. So let's try and get the big picture in mind here and look at where Paul is going to go on from here. Paul has said there is this righteousness that comes to us apart from the law, and then he's going to give us an example from the life of Abraham. The example of Abraham is what chapter 4 is all about. In this short section of these 5 verses, Paul is going to say a few things about this faith, and then he's going to repeat those things using the life of Abraham as the example. So, for example, in verse 27, he says, boasting is excluded. And then in chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, he's going to show us that Abraham had nothing to boast about. In verse 28, he will say that this exclusion is because no one is justified, or because a person is justified by faith, not the works of the law. And then in chapter 4, verses 3 to 8, he tells us that Abraham's boasting was excluded because he was justified by faith, not works. In 3, 29 to 30, he says that circumcised and uncircumcised are united under one God by faith. And in chapter 4, verses 9 to 17, he will show that circumcised and uncircumcised are united as children of Abraham. So you see how chapter 4 is going to repeat the points made in this section. This section ties us back to where we have been and points us forward to where we are going. Okay, so I'm going to read chapter 3, verses 27 and 28. Where then is boasting? It is excluded. Because of what law? The law that requires works? No, because of the law that requires faith. For we maintain that a person is justified by faith apart from the works of the law. Paul is using a style of question and answer writing that was fairly common in his time. He's asking a question he's been asked buckets of times before, and he knows is going to come up again, and then as he explains the gospel, he answers the question. The question is, since the works of the law do not produce righteousness, then where is boasting? Or on what basis can we take credit? The answer is, well, boasting is excluded. It's locked out. There is no place for boasting. The next question is, well, on what basis is it excluded? Is it on the basis of the works of the law? Paul says no. If we earned righteousness by the works of the law, then we would be able to boast. No, boasting is excluded because of faith. If we are given righteousness on the basis of faith, then it is gifted to us, and you can't take credit for something given to you as a gift. There's not an inch of room for us to boast if we are gifted with righteousness. Like the turtle on the fence post, we didn't get there on our own. Verse 28 repeats what we have already heard. We are justified by faith alone, without working for it, by the deeds of the law. Now, it's likely that Paul is predominantly addressing the Jewish mindset here. The Jews were religious and moral, especially in comparison to the Gentile world. They have a history with God. They are circumcised. They have the law. They are privileged, and this made them proud. They felt above others, better than those who were not Jews. Paul addresses their pride, for if he can prove that they need salvation, that they are under wrath just as much as the Gentiles, then the same applies to everyone. So he addresses the very human idea that many of us have, that we can boast about our morality, or that we're going to get some kind of points for it or favor. Pride was the sin of Satan. It was the sin of Adam and Eve. Paul mentions the things in which he had taken pride in Philippians 3, 4-6, if you want to look that up. This is human nature. It's a common and very deadly sin. Religious pride is pretty dangerous. If we add even 1 ounce of our own effort, our own works, to what is needed or acceptable for salvation, then it's no longer faith, but works. Of the keeping of the law. And works cannot ever provide what we need. No one does good, so no one keeps the law sufficiently well to earn salvation. Our main problems are that, 1, we want to be able to say that we have earned what we get. We take pride in doing that. And our second problem, we like to look down on others and take pleasure in being better than them. But there is no such thing as salvation by some mixture of faith and works. We can't earn our way partly into heaven just by being better than others, and yet need faith for the bits of sin that we have to admit are in our lives. It's either all faith or it's not faith at all. It's either all of God or it's not of God at all. Salvation through faith alone pulls pride up by the roots and makes Jesus the hero of our salvation story. The spotlight is on him. Faith rests on knowledge of God and who he is, but it's not simply knowledge. It's dependence on Jesus fully. It is not one of the Wright brothers building an airplane and then saying to someone else, "No, I haven't flown in it, but I'm pretty sure it'll fly. You go for it." Faith is risking yourself confidently on the one in whom you have faith, and in this case, that's Jesus. Pride puts our confidence in ourselves, and that is very shaky ground. Faith put confidence in the bedrock certainty of who Jesus is, and that leaves no place for pride. Faith extinguishes human boasting. Is this something you need to examine? Are you relying on your own efforts to achieve God's approval? Pride is a difficult habit or sin to kill off, and we often have to do it over and over. It has a tendency to rebound in our lives. But the only solid ground is faith in Jesus, and there we can have full confidence. Okay, let's read verses 29 and 30. Or is God the God of Jews only? Is he not the God of the Gentiles too? Yes, of the Gentiles too, since there is only one God who will judge the circumcised by faith and the uncircumcised through that same faith. Now, Paul has already shown us that we are all under sin and under the same condemnation. He has shown us we all come to salvation the same way through faith in Jesus. And now he's adding another unifying factor. We are all under the same God. The Jews believe that God is the God of all. They are monotheistic, meaning that they believe there is only one God. There is not a God of the Canadians and a God of Americans and a God for India and a God for Switzerland. There is one God. And all other so-called gods are false and powerless. There is one true God who rules over all, judges all, and owns all. But they had also believed that there was only one way to come to God, and that was by being a Jew. If a Gentile wanted to have a relationship with God, they must convert to Judaism to become a proselyte. And only then would they be accepted. So they limited access to God to those who were Jews or converted to Judaism. Paul is saying that since there is only one true God who is over all, then he is the God of the circumcised by faith, that is those who are Jewish or been converted to Judaism and been circumcised, and also of the uncircumcised through the same faith. He is saying that this one faith is enough, no matter who you are, because it is a faith in the one and only true God. God for both Gentile and Jewish believer. This demolishes the difference between Jew and Gentile and removes the ground for the pride that the Jews had. It puts all people on the same playing field. There is no room for racism in Christianity. All people have the same need due to sin. All come to God through the same faith in the same Jesus who died on the cross for us all. We each have the same value to God, and the same price was paid for each and every one of us, for the pagan Gentile and for the moral Jew, the blood of Jesus. If that is true, If the moral Jew has no place for pride or preferential treatment, then no one else does either. Faith eliminates preferential treatment, for God is the God of all. The world, at least here in North America, preaches inclusivity and understanding and kindness towards all people. It speaks against racism and all the stuff that goes with it, but only in Christ is true equality found. First, in that we are all found equally sinful and needy, and then that we are all equal in our standing and value. So true unity is achieved and will be experienced throughout eternity when people of all nations and all languages and races will together with one voice stand before God and sing his praise. Racism, although we know it is to be outside of God's will and not really and not the reality of our standing before God, is a part of our culture, and it may be part of our inner attitudes. It has to be faced and called for what it is. We have to choose to love and serve others who are not of our race or cultural background or religious background. We may see the sin and the evil in other religions, but that does not give us the right to hate the person who practices that religion. That person is no more sinful than I and is loved by God, who is God of all. Now finally, let's read verse 31. Do we then nullify the law by this faith? Not at all. Rather, we uphold the law. Now again, Paul's asking a question he knows his audience is going to ask, and he has been asked before. If the law does not produce righteousness and justification, then does that mean it is canceled or nullified, of no use? No, he answers instead. Instead, the law is upheld. There are different ideas as to what this might mean. The context helps us to understand what he is trying to say. We have been seeing how Jesus was the atoning sacrifice for our sin. In fact, for all the sin of all the world. In other words, he is fulfilling the requirements of the law regarding the sin sacrifice the law demands. Under the law, a sacrifice not only had to die, but had to meet certain requirements to be suitable. The sacrifice must be perfect, without blemish or damage or weakness. And Jesus meets those requirements. He is perfect, without flaw, sinless. So he is a suitable sacrifice for sin. He fulfills the law in that regard. So the law is not nullified when God justifies us by faith. It is upheld. The law is fulfilled in that the requirements for the perfect sacrifice are met, and it is fulfilled in that the penalty of sin is fully paid. In essence, Jesus fulfilled the law on our behalf so that the condemnation of the law would not fall on us. This is an important truth for those who think that God no longer cares about the law or its requirements. Jesus did not treat the law as something to be ignored, but as something to be fulfilled. He understood that the judgment of the law that the law produced is still in effect for sin. Some people think today that the Old Testament is about the fiery God of judgment and wrath, and the New Testament is all about the God of love who dies but does not judge. And that's not accurate. God has always been a God of love, and he still judges. But in Jesus, he has provided a way for the judgment to be paid by him on our behalf. Accepting Jesus is a choice. That is true. But when you make a choice, you choose the outcome or consequences that come with it. If you choose not to accept Jesus, which you are free to do, then the judgment of sin under the law will still fall on you. That is the consequence of that choice. I hope as you listen to this video that you are a believer in Jesus. But I know that there are people in our churches who have attended church all their lives but do not have a personal relationship with God. And perhaps you aren't even a churchgoer. I don't know who's going to listen to this video in the future. So I really want to be clear for you. See, it's not enough for Jesus to die on the cross. That doesn't help you if you don't believe in him, have faith in him for yourself. I mean, yes, he fully met the judgment of sin, but it does nothing for you personally. You have to respond to his gift. Personal faith is required. An example of this might help you. Imagine you're in Egypt for the very first Passover. You've been told that God has promised that if you kill a lamb in the prescribed way and you put the blood around the doors of your house, and then you go in and you roast and eat the lamb and you stay there all night until morning, you will not die when the death angel passes over the land. Let's assume you're the oldest child in that house. Imagine you killed a lamb, you put its blood around the door, but then you sit in the field all night and watch to see what's going to happen. At midnight, when the death angel passed through the land, would you escape? No, you would die. The lamb was killed. Its blood was shed. It was put around the door, but you did not take shelter under its blood. And this is what it is for a person who does not accept Jesus as Savior and Lord by faith. He died. His blood was shed for you, but you didn't accept it. You did not take shelter under his blood. So the judgment of sin still falls on you. Another example, a more modern one, would be you're diagnosed with a fatal disease for which there is a cure, and you're given a prescription for the medication needed that will cure you, and you go and you get the prescription filled. You take it home. You put it on the windowsill above your bathroom sink, but you don't take the medication. It sits there in the bottle. They don't do you any good. There's no benefit to you. Just having the pills isn't going to help you if you don't take them. So the law is upheld. The righteous standard of the law is upheld. If God were not going to do this, he would not have had to send Jesus at all. He would just lay aside the standards of the law and forget all about it. But then what would be the purpose of the cross or of the death of Jesus? Salvation by faith upholds the righteous standard of God. Due to his holiness, God does not and cannot lay aside his law. It must be fulfilled, and the requirements of the law must be met. It must fall on those who reject Jesus, so the punishment of sin is paid. Only if a suitable sacrifice meets the requirements of the law and pays fully for sin can righteousness come to us. Only then can we be justified. A turtle on a fence post does not get up there by itself. We cannot be justified and declared righteous on our own. Someone must provide it, and only Jesus can do that. Take a minute and make sure that you have more than head knowledge of Jesus. Take a minute to be sure you have faith in Jesus alone to make you righteous and give you a right standing with God. It is the most important decision of your life because you can't get it on your own.